And in this episode, we sit down with Luke McLaughlin, the founder and head instructor at Holistic Survival School right in the greater Asheville area. And we talk about all sorts of things from ancestral skills and knowledge, primitive fire making, to surviving in the wild for 21 days and 40 days and being on a Discovery TV show. There is a lot in this episode. Let's start with a soundbite from Luke.
Yeah, my mission in this world is to help people to remember their wildness and wholeness in being a human in this world and how to connect with the natural world. So my school, Holistic Survival School, teaches adults how to come back to the earth and make things out of our local landscape, how to make our own food, our own medicine, and really just what it means, remember what it means to be human again, is one way I like to say it.
Welcome to Making It in Asheville, a podcast where you get to hear the stories behind some of your favorite artists and businesses here in town. Each episode, we interview a different local Ashevillean and we work to uncover their story, how they're making it in Asheville, and provide you with actionable insights and learnings from each conversation.
And we are your hosts. That was Sarah and I am Tony. We are a husband and wife team that moved to Asheville in May of 2019. Since then, we've set out to answer a single question, and that question is, how does one make it in Asheville? This podcast is the result. And today we have a very different, very exciting guest. His name is Luke, and we go deep onto some ancestral knowledge and survival skills. But before we tell you about today's episode, let's do a quick little soundbite and sponsorship shout out to Range Urgent Care. And so Range, you might remember from the episode a couple weeks ago, is a really unique urgent care clinic in Asheville. It's right on Merriman Ave in North Asheville. And they are doing things fundamentally different from a lot of urgent cares that I'd say exist in the United States. And one of the primary differences is in their payment structure, which is completely transparent. So anytime you go to Range Urgent Care, you're either paying $149 or you are a subscription member and you pay a, call it $30 a month subscription fee. It changes based on if you're a family plan or a single person or a business. But that type of transparency is huge when it comes to healthcare.
And they're also doing a lot of things differently, I think, in terms of the quality of the service that they offer, the friendliness of their staff, and the overall comfort level. So they have things like virtual visits. So if you just need to check in with a doctor, you can call in with them. You can schedule your appointment ahead of time, so you don't have to wait in a waiting room for hours on end, which you probably would have to do in a hospital setting. Range is great if you have something like a sore throat that you just want to get checked out. You need to get a physical, an x-ray, any kind of treatment that's like non-life threatening or
would you call
emergency.
It urgent but not an emergency?
Urgent but not an emergency. Okay. They do a fantastic job of all of that. And like Tony said, it's fantastic for, I think, self-employed small businesses because you know exactly what you're going to be paying before you go in. And you can kind of get the kind of care that I think most people would want.
Most people would want, especially a community like Asheville. I think it's a perfect fit. We're so excited that they exist in our town. And so if you are as interested as we were when we heard about Range and their offering, what we would say is visit makingitinasheville.com/range. We have a page with even more information on Range Urgent Care, but we also have a very exclusive offer from Range to you because you listen to this podcast, and that is a 1 free month in an annual membership, and that works on any of the membership plans. So whether it's a single person membership, a family membership, a business membership, so visit makingitinasheville.com/range to see more about this special offer. So now to episode 55.
With Luke McLaughlin.
Sarah, what did you think? So, because I geek out about all things outdoor wilderness survival and holistic and all. So how did you feel in this conversation with Luke?
Yeah. So I think I went into this conversation being like, I'm not really that interested in survival skills, and kind of like, I think you're expecting a certain persona of Luke, which is not at all what I got. Luke is so sweet, and his message and his mission really goes beyond just learning how to build a fire. It goes into things like healing past traumas and dealing with, inner psychological problems by way of nature. And so that's the aspect that I really, really loved about his mission and his story of, going deeper beyond just, like I said, building a fire or making a knife.
Yeah, I agree. I was struck by that as well. I wasn't exactly sure on who Luke would be. I've followed him now for a while. I've seen highlights from Naked and Afraid, this huge show that's on Discovery Channel that he's been on 3 times, and I believe successfully completed all 3 times, at least twice for sure. But I don't know as much about the 3rd time he was on the show, and so I had a sense of who he might be, but I was really struck by the 3 R's that kept coming up. So one is this rewilding language that he used, of like finding that wild human inside of you, the idea of like relearning, and now I can't remember the 3rd
Remembering.
R. Remembering, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like those 3 R's were just, I find like I am called to it, and I love the way that he communicated the process with which you might begin to explore some of these feelings, because it felt really accessible and approachable, and he made it very clear that you don't need to ever want necessarily to be on a show like Naked and Afraid. It's not for everyone, but this I'd say exploration and the intention of trying to reconnect and relearn what it is to be fully present as a human is a worthwhile, I'd say, adventure.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about his story, how he got into this whole wilderness world. We talk about his experience on Naked and Afraid and how all of that happened. And we talk a little bit also about his business and how he's grown his holistic survival school here in the Asheville area to what it is today. And then I think the last thing that I'll add before we dive into it is that I think there are a lot of skills here that are applicable to anyone, whether you're interested in wilderness or not. One of the things that he really stressed in here is just finding your edge or finding the thing that you're scared of and sort of facing that fear. So I don't want to spoil it. We'll get into it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect way to create the cliffhanger. There are most certainly applicable business lessons here, both in the way that he's strategically changed the way his business teaches some of these lessons, and that idea of finding edges. And so without further ado, please enjoy episode 55 with Luke from Holistic Survival School right here in Asheville. And that is how a professional podcast gets started. So look alive. Cool. So welcome, Luke. Thank you for joining us today. We want to just kind of open the floor and just allow you to introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you're up to today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Luke McLaughlin. I'm the founder and director of Holistic Survival School, based in the greater Asheville area. My mission in this world is to help people to remember their wildness and wholeness in being a human in this world and how to connect with the natural world. So my school, Holistic Survival School, teaches adults how to come back to the earth and make things out of our local landscape, how to make our own food, our own medicine, and really just remember what it means to be human again is one way I like to say it.
Whoa. That is I would say that's not like trivial. It sounds like a huge objective and a big real goal. And I'd argue that the big real, kind of, to quote some business books, the hairy, audacious goal is a good goal to have. So has that always been the goal? Like, is that a relatively new mission statement? Because it sounds very clear. I think you said that wonderfully.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think it's always been within me, that mission. I'd say that's like my soul's work in this world, if you will. And only in the last few years have I been able to get more of a language around it and get really succinct and clear with it. And that's been extremely helpful, in making decisions in business or in life. That's kind of my North Star, is like this commitment statement of like, well, what am I doing again? And so when things come up, I can just kind of hold these options in front of me and be like, okay, well, is this in alignment with my soul's work or not? And then everything is pretty clear. So no, it's a more recent thing, and it's been, as life can be, it's been this an unveiling or unfurling of my mission, right? Like I was a ninth grade biology teacher for a short while.
Wow.
And that was kind of my original mission, was like, well, I'll teach and I'll mentor. And there was truth in that that was part of my work in this world. But doing it in a setting where I'm in a public school with, restrictions and limitations on what I could teach wasn't the truest sense of how I could show up in this world. So, so since then, since basically my mid-20s, I've kind of been refining and getting closer and closer to what feels most alive when I share and what I'm doing here. So, it's definitely been an evolving process.
Wow. And walk us through a little bit the timeline here. So
Sure.
you were a biology teacher, and then, was there something that happened before that sort of shaped your interest in nature, or was it something after that sort of made you change course?
Yeah, it's a good question. I started in high school. One of my nickname was like the hippie jock. So I was like kind of always in both worlds. That like I played sports. Like sports was like my passion. I played 3 varsity sports and was captain of all 3 teams. And
Wow.
like this is just what I did. Like I just loved the camaraderie. I loved the challenge and the physicality. I loved feeling my power in sports. Just like being able to unleash that. Because most of the time in my life I wasn't feeling my power. So sports was a way to feel that. But I also grew up, fishing, and my dad was a big hunter and got me out a lot. And I was always wanting to be barefoot. Like even when I was a little kid, I was only spanked like 3 times is the story in my family, and like all 3 times it was like refusing to put on shoes. So, so there's always been this streak of kind of wildness where I wanted my feet in the dirt. And both my parents were teachers, and because I loved sports, and I was really lucky, I was mentored by a lot of amazing coaches. So I wanted to give back and mentor as well. And the best way that I saw at the time to mentor people was to be a teacher, was to spend hours and hours in the classroom with these kids, and then spend hours and hours with them on the football field or on the basketball court. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why I went into education. I love teaching. I love sharing my passions and getting people geeked out on things that I was geeked out about. And so that's why I was a teacher for the first while. And it was really beautiful in that mentoring. I loved it. But the way I always say it is it felt like I was a bad dad. Like I felt like I couldn't really give the things that these kids needed the most, because I had 6 classes of 30 kids, and each kid presented their own, you needed to see the kid as a whole to really be able to mentor them in a great way. So I didn't have the time. I remember kids coming to me because they trusted me. A lot of my athletes that I was, coaching, they'd come to me with really serious issues. Like, I got my girlfriend pregnant at 14, and my dad, yelled at me last night and abused me. And like, I legally as a teacher couldn't help them. I had to send them to the school counselor, and they had no relationship with the school counselor, and they didn't want to talk to that person. And so I just felt like my hands were kind of tied behind my back about what I could do and couldn't do. And that broke my heart. That was like really, really hard. And so I said, like, I legally had to teach them about like ribosomes and like cell nucleus and all these things. I'm like, why? This isn't applicable at all. This is completely silly. And so I said, there's got to be a way to teach these kids about emotions and feeling and how to feed themselves and where does our food come from, and some of these more what I was viewing as more fundamental, problems that that society wasn't teaching these kids.
Yeah.
So I stopped. And about that same time, at about age 25, I went into grad school for a little bit after that and did some more biology, but that wasn't fulfilling either. And I had always known in my life that I wanted to be like a mountain man, or like a lumberjack was like the archetype I had as a kid. That was like my closest idea of what it would look like to live in connection with the earth and with nature.
And just for context, where did you grow up, and then where did you teach?
Yeah, I grew up in Lansing, Michigan area, so a little town called Mason, Michigan, southern part of Michigan. And I went to Grand Valley State, which is a small college, close to Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the west side. And I was teaching at East Kentwood, freshman campus. So, but yeah, just after my student teaching, I stuck around for a little bit, but didn't last too long. So,
so the quest to become a mountain man begins around age 25.
Yeah. So finally, it was after this little short-lived grad school thing, I had this conversation with this friend that's always going to be in my memory. And I was just like, like everything was going great. I was doing well in grad school, and I was getting paid to get my master's and blah, blah, blah. But I was just unhappy, and I was just miserable. And my friend was like, well, what do you want to do? Like, you look miserable. Like, what do you really want to do? And I was like, well, I just want to go live in the woods. And my friend was just like, well, go do it. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. And I had, I don't know anything, and I don't have money, and I don't have X, Y, and Z, on all these excuses. And my friend Naomi she just was like, kind of popped all my bubbles on all of those. And I decided that night, I was like, okay, I'm going to quit grad school. I'm going to grow out my hair, and I'm going to move out west. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to be outside. And so that was kind of the start of this, actually living for myself, actually being in touch with my authentic self and what I wanted, not what I thought I should do.
So it seems like there's always a Naomi in everyone's story. Like all of the heroes' journeys in some way or another have someone who, to use your metaphor, pops the bubbles and frees you to take those first smallest steps. And sometimes they feel like giant steps, and then like looking back, you're like, I just moved to Wyoming, or what, whatever. And like, that's not that crazy of a step, really. But momentum is something that is actually crazy. And so you take this first step. How does it start to unwind? Because it's one thing. And so I didn't grow up with my father wasn't a hunter. And so it's one thing to have a dad who knows how to hunt, and maybe, you process a deer or two a year for your entire childhood. That would be what I'd call extreme version of survival skill training as a child, which I know isn't true, but like it leans far on that side of the spectrum.
Sure.
That's one thing. An entirely other thing is like bow hunting and tanning and doing all of the things that I see you're doing today. And it doesn't seem like that long of a time from when you got started to today. And that sounds incredible as a journey. So like, what are the early days of this self-discovery?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's see. I guess I just want to, preface like my dad was a hunter and a fisherman, and, his dad was not really that. And so there's just so much nuance to hunting and fishing and tanning the hides, which my dad knew nothing about, and it really feels like this generational learning, right? That like my dad shot with a compound bow, and which is cool, but he didn't like make it himself, but that set me up at a good starting point to move into the next stage of like depth and connection with bow hunting and connecting with the animals. And so I guess I just want to prep. It was like, it's people underestimate how involved these skills are. Like someone will post on Instagram, like ask me a question like, how do you make arrows? And I'm like, oh my God, like, okay, like there's so much to say here. Like, well, where do you live and what season is it? And what are you shooting and what's your bow? And like, there's just, it's so deep. that I
Yeah.
think I just want to like plug that first. That this is like a deep remembering, which is the name of my immersion program,
And I tried to capture that in the knowledge that it seems like there's a lifetime of information that can take you from using a I'll say high speed compound bow that you buy at Dick's Sporting Goods, and then recurving a stick, getting enough tension on it to propel something, and then process an like all that. That just seems like the rabbit hole expands and could be so deep that the process of getting there could be overwhelming. And so I find it very interesting that at 25 or so, it's not like even though you might have had more exposure to hunting than the average person, you were still at the very, very kiddie pool depth of this experience.
Absolutely. That's what I say all the time. I was like, if I could go back in time and hang out with Native, Americans 10,000 years ago on this continent, they would laugh at me. They would think I'm the weirdest adult baby ever. They're like, why are you doing that? Like, that's stupid, And that's that humility just to laugh at ourselves of these like goofy, awkward humans that forgot how to like do human things on our own planet, on our own, or on this continent is it helps me remember that no matter how much I do and how much I learn, like I got mountains, in front of me that I'll never know. And it's really I'm just part of this greater thing of us humans trying to remember how to live in reciprocity with this landscape. So it kind of all got started, like you said, at 25, I quit grad school and I basically said, okay, I'm moving out west because west feels like the place to be. I don't know why.
Gotta go west. It's always been the case. You just go west.
Right? And I ended up finding the perfect job. I just kind of stumbled upon it. It was wilderness therapy.
Oh, cool.
So out in Utah, there's a number of programs where at-risk youth, kids aged 13 to 18, get sent to wilderness programs for 2 to 3 months at a time. So I got a job as a field guide at one of these programs, and my job was to make sure the students stayed alive. We were out in the wilderness with we were sleeping in tarp shelters all 4 seasons. So 110 degrees in the summer and then like -20 at night, in the winter. And so first job was to, make sure they don't die. And second job was to help them work through their issues, their hangups in life. And that could have been everything from, video game addiction, to anger issues, to sexual abuse, to drug issues. It was the whole thing. And in my time there, I fell in love. So we use primitive skills to help create metaphors for these students. And during my time there, I just saw these kids heal so fast. Like in a week, they would be different humans. And I think it was because there were no distractions and because you're in the quiet and you're moving your body and you're eating healthier than what most of the kids were eating. And it was about 3 months into that program that I felt so alive and so aligned with my mission in this world and was able to mentor. And I dedicated my life to doing that work. There's a cool, epic, long story that comes with it, but basically, I did it. I said, I'm never doing anything that's not like this ever again.
And but at that point too, like, had you already had a lot of experiences out camping and like using those primitive skills, or did you have to go through training in order to become, work in this field of wilderness therapy?
Yeah, I had some experience, with hiking and camping, fishing, but nothing extreme. I was still pretty new to it all, and so this program that I worked at, it's called Outback Therapeutic Expeditions. They take in people that don't have any experience really, and they kind of give you the basics. So in that program, for example, every fire every night was created with sticks, and the kids were responsible for it. If you didn't make a fire with sticks every night, well, then you don't get to cook on the fire.
Full on friction fire, like a proper primitive fire. Holy smokes.
Yeah. So these teenagers.
So day, so day one, it's like, all right, guys, we're going to teach you friction fire.
Yep, pretty much.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, there's a little week there where we give them a little bit of grace not to have to make fire right away. But after that, it's pretty serious, and it's amazing how quick teenagers are definitely motivated by their bellies a lot of times. So, you can learn how to make fire pretty quickly if that's...
I feel like anybody's pretty motivated by their bellies.
But especially teenagers. But
yeah.
So I kind of, and then the coolest part of this program, was that we use ceremony, we used, rituals and primitive skills to help further their learning. And your job as a staff was to learn more and more and more, to come with these tools, right? To kind of have all these tools on your tool belt so that you could really meet these kids where they're at and inspire them, instead of saying here's a therapy assignment, fill this out, right? You just bust out this tanned squirrel hide and just start, processing it and working it. And then all of a sudden the teenagers were like, what is that? What are you doing? And it's kind of this coyote mentoring is what we call it, kind of tricky way of inviting them in to hey, isn't this kind of neat? Do you want to learn about it? Instead of forcing it upon them, which sadly so much of our education tends to be.
So how long were you teaching wilderness therapy out there?
Yeah, I did that for 3.5 years. So I think I ended with around a little under 400 days on the trail. So quite a while. And I kind of became the skills guy. The primitive skills just are so fascinating to me. And so I used to travel to their primitive skills gatherings around the country that happened throughout the year. And I would travel to those gatherings, learn some stuff, and then bring it back to my company and teach and share. And so, so for, while I was living in Utah for about 4 years there is where I got my start in primitive skills. And so I'd work for a week and be totally immersed in nature and totally doing primitive skills all the time. And then I'd come home for a week and have nothing to do but primitive skills. And so that was my crucible of learning, where I really learned a lot very quickly and just fell in love with it. So
would you say that you slept more nights out in nature that year than you did in a regular house?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Because even on my off week when I wasn't in the field, I was camping a lot of times and outside. And so, I would say more than 50% for those, 3 years, I was outside more than I was inside. And
crazy.
I crave that.
And so at what point do you make the move towards Asheville area, North Carolina?
Yeah. So after that, my girlfriend at the time, we had met in wilderness therapy. She was working as well, and she went to Warren Wilson. So she was a Warren Wilson student or alum, and she was like, we should go in Asheville. Those are our people, there's so many people doing primitive skills there. And so I said, okay, let's try it out. And so I just moved, not knowing anyone. And very quickly, I broke into or met, the primitive skills community here. And, which it's a mecca. Asheville is a mecca for primitive skills and coming back to the earth. And I always tell people that I'm like, if I don't know how to teach the thing, that you're wanting to learn, I know the person who does.
Yeah.
Because it's just so many people here that, whether it's permaculture or unschooling kids or primitive, natural movement or hunting or whatever, there's someone in this area that's teaching it. So it's been really nice to come here and just feel part of something much bigger, and just kind of finding my niche in it. So
that's awesome. And how long have you been in the Asheville area at this point?
Just over 4 years. Yeah. So I guess almost 4.5 now.
Got it. And to help kind of pace the timeline, because there's at least, I imagine a big strike in the timeline is the first Naked and Afraid experience. That's just my assumption of how your timeline builds out.
Yeah.
Does that happen before you move to Asheville? Does that happen just after, where's it
Yeah.
sit?
So my first jump on the TV show Naked and Afraid was when I was just about done living in Utah.
Okay.
So I had was working in wilderness therapy for like 2 years, kind of developed some skills, then got to go on the show, and that was my first go around in Namibia, and then the second one was right before I moved to Asheville. I was actually living in Michigan for my home state for a few months.
Got it.
And then the most recent one was just a year ago, last spring.
Wow. And so did they approach you and find you and invite you to come on the show, or did you apply to go on this crazy expedition?
I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I applied.
It's cool.
I don't know why, but I saw the show when I was living in Utah, and my girlfriend's godparents at the time had seen the show, and it was relatively new. And they said, "Hey, Luke, this is like what you like to do. Check it out." And I watched an episode or two, and I remember the first few male contestants were like kind of just like jerks, They're like, men are better than women at this, and we're gonna, and I was just like, and they like usually like really got their butts kicked by nature, and I just remember seeing it and be like, well, I can do that and not be a jerk, like I can survive 21 days and not be a total jackass like this guy. So I applied kind of one night. I think I had like a couple beers in me and was just like feeling frisky and like, yeah, whatever, I'll shoot them an email, thinking like there's no way in hell they're going to pick me. And like 6 months later, I'm butt naked in Africa,
Wow.
So it all happened very quickly.
Yeah. So tell us about that experience. Because, I mean, well, I think let's explain a little bit for people who are maybe listening and they've never heard of this show before.
Yeah.
What's the concept? And then tell us a little bit about your first experience, Naked and Afraid.
Yeah. So Naked and Afraid is this wild concept where they take one man and one woman who have never met each other, who hopefully have some primitive skills, and take them to one location somewhere around the world and drop them off naked for 21 days. And the goal of the man and the woman is to hopefully work together and try to survive 21 days with almost nothing. The first go around when I was in Namibia for 21 days, I was with my partner, Lindsay, and we had 2 items. We had, I had a tomahawk, like a little chopping hatchet kind of thing, and we had a cup for boiling water.
I hear that cups and bowls and pots are arguably some of the hardest things to create. Is that fair?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Cutting tools and containers are very tricky to make in nature a lot of times. The funny thing was that our water was very clean where we were in Namibia, and we actually didn't need to boil it. So it was almost like we had one item, and the other one was like this fancy cup that we got to drink out of field centurions, Oh man, and then trying to describe what,
I read somewhere online that you had lost in one of the seasons 25 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've done 2 21-day challenges. In both of those, I lost about 25 pounds. In my 40-day challenge in Colombia, I lost about 50 pounds.
Wow.
And I went in heavier.
It seems like that would be a strategic thing to show up with some extra calories floating around.
Totally. Back on the weight. But yeah, about 25 pounds lighter than even what I am right now is what I like to call like my hunter-gatherer weight, right? Like where it's probably the most efficient for my body to be about 20 pounds lighter. And so I mean, to try and describe what it's like, I mean, there's just so much that happens.
What's the first thing that goes through your mind? Like they drop you off and you're naked with this person who, I mean, did you meet her beforehand or like?
Don't meet so that you have an extra awkward, first meeting. That's
so you're like, hey, I'm naked.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is just like, it's awkward for like 30 seconds, and you're like, all right, let's see what, take a look. Okay, we're done. All right. And then after that, for me, it was just like pure business, I was like, okay, I'm in Africa and there are leopards around me and those look like rain clouds and I don't want to be wet. Like, let's get to work. And that's a lot of what it is, the nudity thing is great for ratings and it's an extra layer of vulnerability that makes it so real. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you kind of forget about it, or at least I did. Lindsay was different. She was very shy and she was always trying to cover up with, as best she could. But yeah, I mean, it was just so much to learn about hunger, what real hunger is, and our relationship to food as humans, our relationship to death, our relationship to struggle. I mean, it's just gold nugget after gold nugget
Yeah.
to suffer that much and to challenge yourself that much.
What was the hardest, like, what was the most challenging experience? Like, or is there a particular story or like encounter with, I don't know, nature out there that you found particularly hard?
Yeah. In Namibia, it was definitely the cold at night. It was just like this unrelenting. I mean, it was going down into like the upper 40s at night, and I struggled with making fire for a long time, which was kind of my like, oh, I'm so good at making fire. My ego was totally attached to that, and it really crushed me that I couldn't make fire from the landscape. And so not only was it this physical, or emotional defeat, it was also this physical reminder for 12 hours every night where, we'd be shaking, like not like jaw shaking, like shivering, but like literally like whole body feels like it's convulsed, like you're sore in the morning from shivering so hard. And I remember this one time you'd kind of like half fall asleep, just for 5 seconds. And then you'd kind of wake up because you're so uncomfortable, covered in bug bites and sunburn and, just miserable. And I remember the feeling of I'd half fall asleep and I'm still shaking and shivering. And I would go unconsciously to reach at my feet towards this blanket that I had fallen off of me, right? That wasn't really there, but and I'd reach for it, and then I'd wake up and realize there was never a blanket, and I was just dreaming. And it was like this complete despair feeling where I just have nothing to cover over my body. So yeah, that was definitely the most difficult for me, and all of my challenges was dealing with that cold without fire.
Yeah, so it'd be one thing if you just dropped an average, call it American, into a landscape and said survive for 21 days. It's another thing that you had at that point had about 3 years of over 50% of the time outside. You've taught some of these skills. I've taken some courses, right? So I'm like a kind of, I have some
dabbler.
I'm very interested, and I've just only had exposure to a couple courses. And one of the ways that I've heard it described in the past is like, you don't set out to make fire, you request fire. And like that would be like an ancestral language for it. Like you're requesting that this thing show up, and the second you think it's coming, it doesn't. It's like a cat. Like fire is like a cat in some way. You can't call it. And so that level of exposure to the things, and then had you tested yourself in like getting ready for Naked and Afraid in a way where you're like, all right, I'm going to go outside in this new landscape and just try and survive? Like, what is preparing for something like that look like? And I ask because I don't think the average listener is ever going to try to participate on Naked and Afraid, but like, what are ways that we could attempt as, call it a normal population or people who aren't overly exposed? Like, what are beginner steps, or how might you test yourself in a way like Naked and Afraid? Call it, RE-eyed and still afraid.
Sure.
How do you prepare?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to make a distinction before I get into that of, I don't think everyone should do this, like, is there value in it? Yeah, absolutely. I think my personal medicine or essence in this world really enjoys pushing myself, right? I mentioned that about the sports, like that's what that allowed me to do. And so I think for me, I just happen to be this subset of nature people that wants to push myself really hard. I'd like to call myself a bro Magden man, right? It's like, I still have this bro culture, but it's like in this hopefully healthy bro culture, but it's in this nature connection kind of way. So that's great for me. I like that, but I don't think that's necessary for people, There's so many ways to connect to nature, whether it be crafting or bird language or hiking or gardening or, even mentoring. I think what what rewilding or what I'm trying to help create is not just these physical skills that are important, like hunting and fire and right, all these kind of like more yang skills. It's most also about these more yin things, about how we connect with each other and how we deal with our emotions and how we, have rites of passage, for teenagers and respect our elders. And so it's like I'm literally hoping, I want to be in a community that has all of those aspects. And I just happen to be the bro-y person who's teaching the hunting and the tool making and all that, because that's what I like. And that's what lights me up. And that's what makes me happy. So, but there is value in, regardless of where you're at and where your edges are at, to be able to push yourself to that edge is so valuable. And so I guess I just want to give so much love and grace to people of like, wherever you're at, that's beautiful. Find your edge. If it's going out by yourself for a night in your backyard and that feels edgy, do that. That's perfect, And if it's like hiking the Appalachian Trail, great. That's great too. I just want us to, as humans, we're not going to get anywhere if we don't find our edge. And it's so easy for us to compare ourselves to each other that, we just got to say where we're at and be honest and remember that we're little kids, in this earth, and we've forgotten how to live in this world in a good way. So, but yeah, so it's really, I guess, just finding where you feel that charge in your body, where you're like, oh, if I camp 3 nights by myself, and like you feel that like little like, ooh, I don't know, that's a good sign that that's doable. That might be at your edge, and that will probably create some growth and some learning experiences.
Awesome. I agree. I once had there's a joke about like this heavy comedian, John Panette, had a joke. He went to a doctor and the doctor said, I have good news and I have bad news. Bad news is you're wildly overweight. Good news is, you can, the diet that I'm prescribing allows you to eat as much salad as you'd like. And so it's like, salad isn't even food. Like, salad is the idea. Like, when I see salad, I think food is on its way. And so one of the ways that I would describe like that feeling that you're talking about, that like is salad, like the fear salad. It tells you that something good is on its way. If you just move, if you move towards that feeling when it shows up, that's curiosity, whatever the language you want to use for it. But like, I in every story I hear, the people who move towards that feeling never have bad things to say about their experiences that come afterward. Like, maybe they bit off more than they could chew, but they were like, all right, so, but I tried the thing, and now I know that is probably a little bit more, and there's a version like less than that I started at, and now I'm well past the hard part. And I love the language of finding your edge, and I love thinking of salads as a promissory note that food is on its way. I think both of those are great.
Yeah, that charge is something, a lot of people, I often get people to try to feel that, connect to that as well when they come to me and they're like, I want to learn skills. And I'm like, cool, what do you want to learn? Like I just said, there's a whole world of soft skills, hard skills, communication skills, crafting skills. Like, what do you want to learn? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, read some of them and then see where the charge is in your body, right? And our bodies are so wise, and it's just like, it's in our psyche or it's in our brain, some story of like, well, I don't know, I guess I like baskets. I've always wanted to learn how to make baskets. I hear that, and kind of help these people give themselves permission to follow whatever their body really wants to do, and courage to go towards that charge.
Well, I love that. And I'll tell a little bit of our story. Is that Sarah's this incredible home cook, and my experience having her in my life has been, oh my God, she pays so much attention to the food choices. And when we were in New York, she'd like ride on a bicycle for miles to go to the Whole Foods that was near us and like bring it back. And I'm like, she cares so much. I have these things that I think I care about, but I've never actually like explored them. And so I like set this whole kind of learning. I called it like man scouting. Like, I wanted to go do things that I felt like a Boy Scout might have learned decades before. And I went hunting with a friend of mine who's like his whole life had hunted with his father. And so I processed my first duck in December of 2018, and
Nice.
I felt that if I didn't go hunting and I didn't try and process and like harvest an animal, there was an issue with my relationship with food that I needed to sort out. Then I felt that if I went hunting and realized that it freaked me out way more than I was prepared for, then there was definitely a problem with my relationship with food, and I would need to work that out. And what I found, and I was very thankful for it because it like confirmed an assumption, but I was thankful to find I'd never felt more human than in this like really important process for me of harvesting two little ducks that, you know, that morning were flying around, didn't know that it was going to be their last day. And like I'm sweating thinking about it, but it was like a huge deal for me. And I wonder like how it's oh man. So like my process, I got pretty clear on what the steps might look like. I looked at my network and I saw who I might reach out to. And then I've continued to go in some ways down that path. As a first step, it doesn't necessarily seem like going hunting is the right fit. Is the first step looking for a holistic survival school nearby and like starting in a program, or is there something in the middle? Is it we work with the butcher shop in town. Is it like learning to break a chicken? Which honestly, now that I think back, was the trigger to go hunting, because I thought that buying a whole chicken for the first time in my life was one of the most crazy processes I'd experienced. And I'm like, and it came in a plastic bag.
They do.
Like how can
they
this
just come like that?
Like
they
how
grow
can this
like
be
that.
the craziest experience? It showed up in my house in a plastic bag. This is the best experience I've ever had. I need to go further. Where do you think people could start or should start, or it's different on everybody, but what are examples, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah, I think
in the relearning, or
sure.
rewilding? I love that as language to communicate this process.
Yeah, the relearning, the rewilding, the remembering, right? I think it's great to start, like I said, with that charge of just like try to find maybe a website or someone, you know, who has some experience, or maybe because I remember when I was thinking about quitting grad school, I didn't even have an image of what life could look like connected to nature. Like I always said, oh, I want to be a mountain man or a lumberjack, which is not really like, you know, mountain men trapped the crap and almost killed all of the beavers in America, for example, and lumberjacks like clear cut forests. Like those were not actually what I was looking for, but those were the closest examples of what I had in my brain in our culture of what I could do, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't even have this idea of rewilding and like trying to become, you know, me as a human trying to become part of this web of life, right? Or this reciprocity, these cycles. I couldn't even wrap my brain around it.
Yeah.
So it is important for us to, you know, if you can find someone who's kind of been in the scene for a while or knows all the teachers. So yeah, I think start with that charge of what naturally are you drawn to, and then ask around. And I think everyone is different. And as, you know, as a mentor, once again, trying to come at this from a holistic view of like where your passions are and where your gifts are and where your edges. And with that, you know, like I'm kind of getting this idea of there's these, like I mentioned before, there's primitive skills gatherings around the country. One of the longest running primitive skills gatherings is just in South Carolina. It's in the spring, it's called River Cane Rendezvous. And in the fall, it's Falling Leaves Rendezvous. You can look those up online. Highly recommend it for anyone who's interested, because what that is for a week, you know, 300 to 400 people will gather on this land, and we'll teach these skills, and we'll eat together, and we'll sing around the fire, you know, and we'll dance at night. And the kids are off in their own like little feral pack of wild kids, and the elders are over here. And it really creates this, you know, the closest I've felt to being in a tribe or a village. And I love watching new people come in, and they just kind of gravitate to where they want to go and where they're excited about, what they're excited about learning. And so it's like this really like, you know, this physical manifestation of the field of what could be in rewilding. And like literally, physically, you'll just kind of like, oh, well, all the flint knappers hang out over there. If you want to make stone tools, they're that way, and they kind of just gravitate naturally that way. So that's a great kind of introduction to primitive skills, where you can kind of dabble, take this class on this day and this class on the next day, and just see what you enjoy and what kind of, what you're drawn to. So, primitive skills gathering. So, I haven't plugged that enough.
It will be in the show notes, everyone.
Yeah.
Don't worry. So, I'm going to sort of pivot and bring us back a little bit to your own story. So, you go on Naked and Afraid, and then you go once, and then you go back again once or twice.
2 more times.
2 more times.
Yeah, 3 times total.
Crazy. That's bananas to me. But so then what led you to starting a survival school of your own here in Asheville?
Yeah. Well, I started holistic survival school just as like kind of a side thing, because I wanted to teach adults. I saw the value and potency of people getting away from their phones and getting outside and using their hands and being in community. And basically, since I stopped working wilderness therapy, I said, this is what everyone needs. Like, this is why, we don't get this as adults, and very few, kids get it. So that's been my mission, is trying to figure out how to bring wilderness therapy to adults. And, it's been tricky, it's been tricky so I kind of started holistic survival school started as weekend classes. Mm-hmm. Where I would just have, 4-day class, and we're going to tan a hide in 4 days, come and hang out. And, I'd get signups were hard, especially in Asheville when there's so many outdoor nature things. Right. And I felt like it was hard to rise above the crowd in that way. Weekend after weekend, I'm trying to fill these, 20 weekends for the year. And, that's a lot of people to try to sign. It's like 200 people I was trying to get to sign up for a year. And in these weekends, it was really beautiful. We would come together on the first day, and we'd be strangers, and then we'd start working these things, and we'd start sharing vulnerably. We were hanging around the fire at night, and by Sunday, we were finally coming together as this like little mini unit of all these strangers coming together and having these connections. And then the class was over, and we were done, and we would never see each other again. And we were just starting to get to the juicy stuff. And as myself, with my background in psychology and holistic counseling and different healing modalities, I was always trying to go deeper, right? Mm-hmm. I love getting to the depth of our human experience and how we can heal. Like, creating fire with sticks is great, but if it's not creating a story that makes us better humans and makes this world a better place, then what's the freaking point, right? Like, I love primitive skills, but if it's not doing something to our psyche and to our community and to our connection to the natural world, then I'm not too interested in it. So that's kind of the why, the duality of my school. I'm trying to bring both of those things together. So for a long time, holistic survival school was kind of just struggling of just barely filling these weekend classes, and I wasn't quite getting to the depth that I wanted to teach at. And so then my girlfriend, I'll give all credit to my girlfriend, who is also an entrepreneur in Asheville. She was just like, your business model is terrible. Like, you need to, you should change it. And she encouraged me to do this more immersion style. So basically the same thing I was teaching, but have people sign up for the whole package deal. So that every, weekend class I had was the same people showing up, so we could create community. We could hold that container throughout the year. We could come together and see each other in our strong points and see each other in our struggles. That allowed me to get more depth, so I could teach. Like I said, primitive skills is very deep and very involved, but also with the healing modalities. So, doing breath work and releasing trauma, learning how to, get that stuff out of us, right? Like, ancient humans knew how to breathe and how to shake out the trauma, and we've forgotten. So kind of pairing these two worlds up and doing that, throughout the year with the same people really changed holistic survival school for me. So, so I actually just started in March, but we had our first weekend right before the big pandemic, and it was beautiful and amazing and connective. And so it's kind of like very frustrating for me to be on pause because of this great pandemic of the start of this new chapter of Holistic Survival School.
I remember, I think the first DM that I sent you on Instagram was like the week after applications had closed, and I was like, 2021, I'm going to talk to Mrs. U and see about making this happen, because I think that your girlfriend is correct. I think that there is something really, the idea of going deeper and offering a deeper relationship, and that deeper relationship also having a much higher ticket price is a strategically good decision to make. It's hard to have a lot of customers. It just is, right? And it is a known in business that like having customers who are purchasing your service at what you might consider like a discretionary price point are historically not great customer types. Like you want people to have to be sort of to think like, man, is this the right thing for me right now? Yes, no, it's a big commitment of time, money, whatever, input that they'd have to give, and then say yes. And when they do, they're going to show up with a lot more enthusiasm. And there's something really powerful about that commitment on the customer side that makes them great customers versus like it's a $75 2-day class and, I'm not even going to send an email because I'm not going. It doesn't hurt me. I don't care enough. It was a cool idea. And so I think that she's correct. And I think that without knowing the market, I have to assume that what you're offering is also a pretty relatively big pattern break from maybe the rest of the market. And that it also is a good thing. So hats off to her. How has that experience been so the two questions I'm having is like, A, have you been able to do it? Did you put it on pause? And then B, have you seen like an increase in outreach in the last 2 months? So this is 2020 as this is being recorded. We're in the middle of coronavirus pandemic, but like, have you seen people reach out as they start to think, oh my God, what would it look like if we had to escape into the wilderness, which I don't think is necessarily a good strategy for anyone right now, but like, have more people been reaching out?
I wouldn't say so. No, not okay. At least not yet. Well, that's not true. I guess I did have a few people that like just missed the cutoff for the application process, and it was like kind of like early spring, and the warm weather starts happening, and they're like, "Ooh, can I get in?" And I'm like, "Ooh, sorry, like we already started." Yeah. And I did have a few people once the pandemic started, kind of want to connect to people. I think our quarantine, social distancing, kind of creates this backlash of like, I need human connection right now. So I guess I did have some of that, but more so more so around community and less around the like fear survival. Okay. Although I have had some, random folks reach out and be like, the end of the world is coming. Can I join? I'm like, no, I'm okay. Thanks.
I love that. And I'm wondering too, if you've seen like a difference in the audience from like if you've seen more locals joining this full immersion longer program versus people who were just coming for the weekend from other places, travelers. Have you noticed a big difference in that?
I thought I was only going to get Asheville folk for my immersion, but because it's 1 4-day weekend per month, it allows people to travel. So I got student in Florida right now. I have a student who's, South Carolina, one student who's living in Oklahoma right now. So I was surprised that people are traveling. Wow. A lot of new folks to Asheville, though, is one, I've had a couple students that are like, I just moved to Asheville, and I think this is a great way for me to get introduced to the landscape, to get introduced to some friends and some people. So I think that makes a lot of sense. There's always new people coming into Asheville, and I'm happy to be kind of like their landing pad, to help them feel connected emotionally and also connected to the landscape.
And have you done anything marketing wise, or have you just sort of like put it out there and people came or is there a strategy marketing?
I finally hired a marketing helper this last fall. And so it was a big push for me. I think I announced applications in my program, Deep Remembering, in September. So like September all the way through December or January, I was taking in applications. And, my marketing peer really helped me realize how much material I already had, like from Instagram posts and my, a few blogs I've written, but he's like, you got so much, every post on your Instagram is like, it's solid and there's plenty of there. And I was kind of in this mindset of like, I don't have anything to offer these people in these ads and whatnot. And so I hit it pretty hard on, Facebook and Instagram, and it was kind of exploratory of like, I don't know what's going to happen. Will someone sign up for this who's never met me, And the answer is yeah. Some people resonated with my thoughts and stories enough and were so ready for change and something different that they said yeah without too much interaction with me. Mm-hmm. And then, I'd say about half my class this year also met me at primitive skills gatherings and heard me tell a story about Africa around the fire. And were just like, mind blown and like, I want that experience, So kind of a 50-50 mix. Yeah.
Well, I as I think back to some of the first DMs to your Instagram account, one of the things I remember saying was like, oh, wow, a call to action to join the email list. That's good, which is, it seems so basic. It's, to me, like it feels 101 for a business to do that, but that is not the truth, right? Like, it's common, let's say, but not common practice. And I'm wondering in you have a gift, let's say, which is, your background as an educator and teacher. You also have a gift, which is the fact that you've been on this huge television show a couple of times, and so you have an audience, but that audience who's on TV, doesn't hear from you when you want to tell them something, and that audience who's on Facebook or Instagram might hear from you when you want them to hear something. And so when I saw that you had a call to action that said, hey, join the email list, that made me happy because I'm like, now you have this direct line to tell the stories that you want to tell, to announce the projects that you're coming out with, whatever it might be, and that made me happy. Have you been using, because I don't remember seeing emails come out from you, and that might be a me thing, but do you lean into email marketing?
Yeah, so this is once again my girlfriend teaching me, right? And this is funny because it's kind of mirroring and this is what I keep trying to tell myself when I do computer work and I do marketing stuff. I can get into like a shame, inner critic, like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm an idiot. Just stop, And I try to remind myself, like, okay, I'm the student who's coming to a primitive skills class who feels like they know, right? And I'm like, okay, marketing has something to teach me. I can relax and I can learn. So, thank goodness for Luna, who's actually my fiance. I forgot to mention that.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. She, she's been really like, she eats up business podcasts and just loves it. And she's like, yeah, you got to get your email list going stronger. So I do have an email, an email list. I don't do very well in sending out enough stuff on it. I think especially right now, I just kind of feel like I'm in a holding pattern where I'm like not fully taking in applications for next year. And like, still like, I don't have much to share about what I've been doing, but, that's probably not true either. So, I'm
getting nods from this side of the screen. And the listeners were like, "That's a story that you're telling yourself." Is what we're nodding as we're nodding.
Okay. Well, who am I? Don't worry about me. So it's just, and that's why I love podcasts. This is where I feel like I can get on, and just talk. It's just so much easier for me to talk than it is to type and to try to succinctly put down, what I'm trying to convey without my inner critic just taking over,
Maybe we should invent, I guess you could in theory just do this, but like an audio email newsletter that is just you leave a little message and then you just send it and people can listen to it from your email. I think that's saved everyone a ton of time.
We might be
Is
onto
that a
something.
thing? Is that a thing?
I don't know.
So we've had a guest on our show named Zack Greenwald, who is he owns a gym in town, and his only form of communication with like dozens or hundreds of members that are either in the gym or his personal clients is in little voice memos. He doesn't text because he's like, the nuance in what I'm trying to deliver gets lost in even the most perfectly crafted text message. So he exclusively communicates via voice memo. And I'm like, that's actually sick. Like, that's a really cool way, if only as a pattern break, right? Like all of the text messages that a person gets and then they get your voice, that's cool. And so I don't know if that's an actual marketing platform that exists, but one of the reasons why Sarah and I started with this podcast a year ago is because I was like, there's no such thing as speaker's block. I mean, some people stutter, some people get more nervous about the words, but if I say, I'm sorry, what? They have something to say to like work that route in a different way. Whereas you could look at a screen and be like, I don't know the first word. You could fill silent air, almost certainly anyone. And so, well, most people. And so I do believe that you're right in thinking that podcasts are great because A, there's no writer's block. B, you're able to just create on the fly and circle back if it didn't make sense the first time, and it just creates more context for the message, as opposed to like a bad speaker can still convey a message. A bad writer can be a train wreck.
Totally. And that's what I say with like when people are trying to learn plants, like, so I put my immersion on hold, and one of the classes we put on hold is, plants. And I was like, okay, y'all, I'll send you out Zoom, and here's some YouTube videos. And it's like, it kind of works, but like we are designed to be these verbal communicators who tell stories and convey amazingly complex messages with our face and our hands. What I'm doing right now while I'm talking, and that's how we learn. And that's the best way to learn, is to tell stories when I'm talking about plants. So there's just, writing and typing for me just is hard, and it feels like I'm just like fighting against the grain in a way.
And specifically with plants, I've heard that one of the best ways to receive education with plants is to see another human actually put it in their mouth. Because you can tell me that this is safe, and I'll be like, I just don't know. It could maybe not be safe. And then, but if you eat it, then I'm like, all right, well, I'll try it. Okay, cool. That's peppermint. Cool. That's fun. I don't know. I just, so that I agree. Learning plants in a book, I've attempted a couple times. I'm like, this isn't how I learn. So I'm not. This doesn't light me up, to use that's not the edge that I'm trying to find.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally. It's tricky. The more senses we can get involved, the more we're going to remember it. So I always say, tell a story, tell a joke, smell it, taste it, rub against your face, all those are good.
I love that.
Just that poison ivy all over my face. I'm like, I did everything you said.
You won't forget it. I'm sure it'll be a memorable experience. Maybe I need to do that with my email list, right? Somehow get it on my face, make it have smells. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know.
Well, we got to think about that. Maybe we can make a email class, immersion class. I don't know, something like that.
I think we're on to
we're not far from the truth here, but I love that your point, which I want not to blow past, is that I love that you saw that in marketing, which feels foreign to you, there is, if you approach it with a beginner's mind and this hunger to learn, rather ego, is a good thing. Like I've taken at least two proper outdoor survival type courses before, and I've watched more people make feather sticks than any normal person should. I'll tell you what, at 11 o'clock at night, in almost 0 degree or maybe 0 degrees in upstate New York, I, for what felt like my life, could not make a feather stick. And it's so easy when you watch it on YouTube. It's so easy that how could it be hard? But I'd say that it took me about 2 hours to turn a feather stick into a fire. And it was the most humbling experience that I've ever had. I can't imagine actual stakes, i.e. 21 more days of not being able to use the sharp knife that I had and like have the bumpers of a professional, Green Beret next to me, who if it got weird, like he had started the fires, like we would have been good. But that was just so crazy, and it felt so... it was just that was a huge reminder for me that it's the actual application of the theory that counts, and not just like, I've watched 4 hours of people doing this, I know that if I had to, I could. That is not true, it turns out.
Yeah, and I think that's how sadly I need to learn in that way, where my girlfriend, who's an amazing business person, will be like, I keep saying my fiance, who's an amazing business person, will be like, hey, you should do this. And I'm like, yeah, like I have to experience the cold night of not having success to learn it. And then I'm like, oh, that sucked. Like no one signed up for this thing. Okay. Like now I get it. Now I'll listen.
If we had been emailing this whole time, they might have. We need to email this whole time. I get it. Yep. Cool. I feel like Sarah is about to transition us in the conversation, but there's one last thing that I was thinking of earlier, and it's so we're talking about ancestral skills, and that language is showing up a lot in the conversation. We've mentioned in past podcasts the idea of like stoicism, and one of the things that's come up for me is this. I want to say Seneca was a person who championed it, but the idea of spending some amount of time every year or at every interval doing the thing that experiencing the thing that you're most afraid of. So he would say, live on the street, beg for money, don't eat for days at a time, because that will remind you of just give you a sense of perspective. But there seems to be a huge upside in doing the things that you might be most afraid of. And if, it turns out that I am in fact afraid of like sleeping outside, it gives me a sense of anxiety and fear that I also loved. And so, or being that cold, or not being able to do a thing that looks so easy online, like all of those things give me an incredible amount of fear. And so I feel called to do that more. And it's stoic, it's maybe human, I don't know. But what's your take on doing the things like starving for 21 days and losing 25 pounds? Should people do that so they know that they can do that? Is that the only way to learn it?
I don't know if it's the only way to learn it, but I think it's an approach. And I think it's an approach for people, who maybe have more intense things in life. I would say that's, I tend to be more that way, like I've kind of mentioned. Because I do things like Naked and Afraid and, go hunt and run down animals in Australia with my bare hands because life is so easy for me. I'm very lucky and privileged to have like a very comfortable life, and it helps me feel alive that there's a challenge in front of me, that there's something intense happening. So that's, I don't think it's not the only way, but it is a way to heal. And, in my program, I talk a lot about, healing trauma. And for example, the example I use is if we have, trauma can be stored in our bodies, right? And wild animals have that. They get hunted and they're almost attacked. They can tighten up. You can feel your body, your shoulders come up and have this traumatic response. And in nature, animals can complete that cycle. So if something scary happens, our shoulders get tight. Maybe we're in a car accident or something like that, right? Our shoulders get tight, but then we never learn how to let go, right? We don't complete the cycle of, oh, it's okay, I'm safe now. And so what happens is this trauma gets stored in our body. Let's say it's in our shoulders, right? A lot of people have shoulder problems. And so we get this trauma in our bodies, and it's like, oh, my shoulders are tight. Well, I should loosen my shoulders, right? So you try to relax your shoulders, and you try to deep breaths and only relax them. You don't work out your shoulders because you're like, well, they're already tight. I don't want to use them. I don't want to stress them, right? And what that's actually doing is that's the opposite of what we need to do. What we actually need to do if we have tight shoulders is tighten them even more, right? Is to really, really squeeze them. So then we can learn how to relax. And so there's kind of this concept with healing trauma that you actually have to squeeze that muscle tighter in order for it to relax. So we have to go to those dark, scary places within our own emotions, right, or within our bodies to complete the cycle to heal. So so going to those scary places, let's say you don't want to feel fear, right, and you avoid fear at all costs, or you avoid anger at all costs. Well, that which you resist persists, is a good saying, and so if we don't go to those places, then it's going to remain that way. If I don't face my fear of sending out emails to my marketing list, that fear is going to sit there. And so what I find huge value in going to those hard places and approaching the darkness, approaching the fear, and then realizing that, oh, actually wasn't that scary. It was my fear of the thing itself. That was the thing that was causing all the pain in my life, and not the email or whatever. So yeah, absolutely. Do the hard things. Go find the thing that scares you the most and do that. Absolutely. That's how I like to approach life. And that's brought so much healing and acceptance into my world that I would encourage everyone to do that, because life, most of the time we can sit on the couch and watch Netflix. So, go do some hard things.
I love that. Luke, tell us a little bit about what's next for Holistic Survival School, but also just for you. What are you kind of thinking about for the future? And I know, of course, that everything with Corona has put that kind of on hold. But let's say once all of that kind of is over, what are you thinking about next?
Yeah, I'm with my immersion program with Deep Remembering. I'm just really excited to hone that for the next number of years and just really dive in deeper and deeper, and hopefully build multiple year levels. So after your first year, if you want to continue and start mentoring, as a second year student, to kind of come back and have part of that experience and kind of build this, greater community around this immersion program. So I'm excited. Applications are open for 2021 if people are,
Do you want to talk through, like, maybe just on a high level what that curriculum even looks like, just conceptually?
Yeah, thanks. So Deep Remembering, 9-month immersion program, 1 4-day weekend per month, paired up with holistic counseling sessions as well. So each individual student gets time with me to kind of talk and work through, any blocks that they might have. But basically, every weekend is revolving around one skill. So for one weekend, in August, we'll build our own Osage bow, right? We'll build our own hunting bow. The next weekend, we'll build our own baskets. We'll tan animal hides. We will make bone tools. We will make stone tools. We will sew together, moccasins or, items from our tan deer hides. And the idea behind each one of those items is to bring intention and ceremony and, a greater metaphorical truth with each skill, so that it's not just about, learning how to tan a hide, but it's learning about how to take, a stinky deer hide that no one wants and transform it into something beautiful, and the magic of alchemy. And how do we take the thing, like we were just saying, the scary, dark thing that we don't want to face? How do we take that and learn how to take it in and transform it? So you can maybe start to get the feel of, like, kind of this metaphorical weaving with these actual physical skills that we're learning every weekend. And then kind of combine that with, like I've mentioned, trauma healing, using somatic experiencing, which is just like feeling our bodies, counseling sessions, community, ceremony and ritual, trying to learn how to be a human in relation with this natural world. And so every month, we come together as a community and get to know each other and show up vulnerably and authentically, which, I think in these times with this pandemic it's exactly like, it's like, so what we need, to be able to come together and share what it's like, to live in these times and to try to remember what it's like to be witnessed and to witness other people in these difficult times, highs and lows. So yeah, so that's the big thing is I'm trying to go all in with this immersion. And I mean, it's been so transformative, both primitive skills and these different healing modalities for me in my life, that I can't not just like want to just share it with everyone in such a beautiful, beautiful way. So I'm excited to keep doing that.
About how big might a group be, or a class, I guess might be the language for it?
Yeah, this year I got 9 this first year. Love to get it up to 12 to 15. Would be ideal. So.
Yeah. And is there a world? I mean, imagining that the next year is absolutely high growth for you. And is there a world where you'd have like a class that meets on the first weekend and a different group that would meet on the second weekend? Or are you trying to do, one family, just one weekend a month per?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I would love, I've definitely thought about kind of doing tiered weekends like that, because men's work is another thing that I've been really intrigued, and excited about and sharing. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I could have my men only kind of weekend thing, and then the all inclusive kind of one. So yeah,
I just find it interesting, and I imagine that it's not a inconceivable future where 40 people would be good fit applicants, and I just don't imagine. Then I begin to say, well, I imagine that there's a benefit to something like a 12-person group, rather because then you're back in your science class where you have 30 kids and you can't treat all of them the way that you want to, and so there is, it seems like, value in having a small weekend tribe, but if the demand side of the equation goes up, how do you solve for that? It's very interesting. Sarah, all I'm saying is 9 months, you're going to have a weekend to yourself, it seems, in 2020.
Go.
She's
like, please.
Yeah. Love to have you.
I think that's very cool and very exciting. And I again, love it. And I love it as a way to, for you to double down on this very clear mission statement and purpose statement that you delivered at the top of the call. Awesome. Do you have more questions about the future, Sarah?
No, I was ready to go into our speed bonus round.
Speed bonus round stuff could be cool. And I might sprinkle like gear questions or outdoor questions because that's what interests me as well.
Please do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So we'll just ping pong back and forth a few questions to you. My question to you is, if you had to bring just one item with you into, I don't know, the Appalachian Mountains, let's just say, your own version of Naked and Afraid, what thing would you choose to bring with you?
I'm bringing a knife. It's not very entertaining, but we don't have a lot of good stone around here for cutting materials. So either that, or sometimes I think about bringing a bottle of whiskey, because then I could have a container, I could drink if I was really cold and miserable, or I could break it and make sharp things out of it. So that would be the cooler answer. But in reality, it's really my skin on the line. I'm bringing a knife.
Got it. And just because now, to go a step deeper, because I think about knives, I have it. Is there like a beginner's knife? I typically see like Mora knife is like what people seem to point most people to. Like when you think knife, are you thinking some 4 or 5 inch fixed blade type of a knife? Or yeah. I mean, Mora is great for Mora Companion is like kind of the go-to stainless steel, hard to beat up. If you lose it, it was $17, no biggie. I'm bringing my custom knife that I've spent a lot of time with. It's about 4 inches and full tang, and it's hardy and I can beat the crap out of it. I can chop big stuff if I need to, but most of the time, you don't need to do big cutting. It's just little stuff. So that's probably what I'm thinking. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So normally we would ask, what's your favorite food here in Asheville? But what I want to ask you is, what's your favorite food that you forage out in the wild? Like, is there one thing that you find and you're like, yeah, this is gold?
Oh, forage, yeah. I mean, oyster mushrooms are my favorite. Everyone's all crazy about morels, and I love morels. Don't get me wrong, but they're so damn hard to find. And I'm like, I think oysters are just as good as morels. So I really love that, and we're in a good mushroom place here in Asheville. But I think the best thing I've ever eaten in the wild is electric eel. I had that in Colombia, and it was like the fattiest, juiciest, amazing. It was like 6 feet long and 60 pounds,
Yeah.
and we're roasting it over the fire in little chunks. It was like the
And
best day of my
I
life.
have to imagine when you're like really hungry that
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of like fatty protein just must be amazing. Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. Hunger is the best ingredient to any food.
Is it true that like the flavor of fat or fat in the wild is like the hardest thing to come by, and like the thing that your mouth most loves when you get a chance to have it, or is sugar? What do you think?
Ooh, tough. I think fat is like what makes the world go round in the wild. I remember when I was in Africa, I killed an impala while I was hunting with my bow, and I'd had the meat out. And impalas are very lean animals, kind of like our white-tailed deer, and I'd have a whole leg out drying in the sun, or strips of it, and the ants would come and only eat the fat. They didn't care about the meat at all, but every animal was trying to go for that fat as fast as possible because it's just so powerful and packed with nutrition.
Calorie and nutrient dense.
But sugar is sugar's like the sugar on top. Like it's like so amazing, but it's so rare in nature that, I think it's, they're both amazing. I remember eating the liver of the impala. Well, I hadn't eaten in like 10 days. And I ate the liver raw, which is what most people around the world have done traditionally. And it was the sweetest thing ever. It tasted like sweet corn. I mean, the texture of it, and there is some sugar in liver, and that's why people eat it right away, is because it's so sweet. And when you haven't had sugar in so long, it tasted like candy. I mean, it was the best thing I've ever had. I mean, besides the eel. So yeah, both sugar and fat are really, really amazing in nature.
Whoa. Okay, that answer was so good. Thank you. That answer was like sugar or fat.
So what's the thing that you miss the most when you're out in the wild about, quote unquote, like normal life or life at home? What's the thing that you miss the most?
It's a good question. I mean, in some ways, sugar. I I feel so shallow saying that, but sugar is such a drug. Like I eat it, like I eat it somewhat regularly in my life, but it's amazing to go without it and how much your body reacts. I mean, I was stuffing my face with meat and fat from the animals I killed on some of my journeys, and I'm dreaming about sugar still,
Yeah. Any particular form of sugar? Like, I don't know, do you go for Skittles or like, cookies, or like what kind of form?
Well, it was like really mild sugars, like bread. I didn't want like chocolate or super sweet. I just wanted like a bran muffin.
Yeah.
Like I was like, that sounds. I really crave egg yolks too, which I've learned is like a phosphorus deficiency kind of thing. I always wanted runny egg yolks in nature. But beyond that, I just comfortable seat. Like something cozy is really nice, whether that be my dog or my fiance to cuddle or just someone to like, soothe my nervous system with. That's what I missed a lot.
Yeah. Can't beat the cuddles, tell you what.
The hardest, most hardcore survivalists in the world, but deep down inside, we all need some cuddles.
And there's something to be said about a thing that I've heard is a sound, like the sound that will most help a human fall asleep is the sound of a dog sleeping, because somehow or another it like allows you to relax, because that the dog would hear it if there was something to be worried about. And totally. I think that your point on like a cuddle and like a bedmate does seem like a really true.
Or like now I struggle to fall asleep without Tony like in the bed physically with me. Like if he's upstairs watching TV, I'm like, you need to come downstairs now because I can't fall asleep without you. It's just weird. It's like I can sense that you're there or not there and can't sleep.
Yeah, we're extremely social creatures
Yeah.
that are very vulnerable by ourselves. And our dogs, I have a sweet Wolfie dog, and he's, what I say, our primitive alarm system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like barking is weird. Like that's a weird thing for an animal to do, but it's like literally telling us back, 10,000 years ago when there were American lions and a whole bunch more animals that would eat us. Dogs were extremely valuable in that. So we still have that part of us in our bodies that just wants, our nervous system can't relax, or it's harder to relax if we don't have a person who's kind of like looking out with us, or a
Yeah.
dog. That's
Mm-hmm.
what we're built for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things in walking in the woods that I only learned in a class is just it's some I'd say the average person is very like when on a hike is very destination focused. Like I want to get to the top, I want to get to the lookout, and I want to get back to my car. And one of the things that is missed often is like the noise of the space and how much you can learn about what's happening by the noise of the space. And so I was in, the Hudson River Valley, and it was very loud with just sound. I don't know, like sound. And then all of a sudden it would get quiet. And the people that I was with, like, I didn't notice it the first couple of times, but they're like, "Did you notice that the squirrels stopped talking to each other?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we think might have happened that the squirrels have stopped talking? And I don't know what the answer is still, but like, it's an alarm system that wasn't a dog even, but that could have communicated something happening in the surrounding area, and it's easy to miss because I don't think we've been unwired. Like that's something that I don't think would have been possible to not notice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost impossible to notice for me, an iPhone user.
Right. Yeah, bird language is like the big skill. It's not necessarily like identifying birds, right, in the wild, but bird language is the birds are the voice of our ecosystems, and they're always communicating to us, along with squirrels and other animals. But birds are big time talkers, and so they're always talking to us. And there's a famous teacher, John Young, who spent a lot of time in South Africa with the Bushmen there. And their culture is built upon bird language, like they're always paying attention to what the birds are singing, and John, one of his first trips there, tells a story where he's like, oh my gosh, how does this 6-year-old know what the birds are saying and what that means? And and the Bushmen were like, well, if he didn't pay attention, the lion would eat him, like, it's just our way of life. And, John kind of likened it to if we brought a Bushman child to New York City, they would be like, how do you know not to cross the street right now? It's like, well, we pay attention to the signals, that we grew up with that seem so normal, but to them, it would have been novel. So,
Wow.
Yeah, good stuff.
That is good stuff.
So the last question of the speed round, and really, I guess, the interview, is our magic wand question, which is if we had a magic wand, or someone in our audience had a magic wand that could grant you any wish, what one thing would you wish for in this moment?
Oh my gosh. Answer that question. That's so good. I think it would be to magically transport me to 13,000 years ago in North America, and I could go on a woolly mammoth hunt with Clovis culture people and get to participate in a megafauna hunt with stone tools with fellow humans. I think it sounds so silly. I'm embarrassed that I'm tearing up right now, but like that's how much my soul feels. That's what I want so badly. And so I think I would do that.
Wow,
That's a good answer.
That's an appropriate type of response to this question that is so unique to you and perfect, and it makes me think of the movie that I think Sarah most verbally communicated her appreciation for that we watched recently, which is called The Croods. Have you heard of this children's
of it. I
cartoon.
haven't seen it.
So it's like, it's not Pixar, but it's something. It's like maybe DreamWorks, but it's called the Croods, and it's about this family that were like
A cave family.
that were cave dwellers that were like hyper afraid and not sophisticated, and meeting this guy who's like a more. So I don't know the exact language on it, but he's more of like a Homo sapien versus like Neanderthal.
Sure.
And this guy's like captured fire, and they're like, "What is that? Like, how did he do?" And it's really cute, and it's a I don't know. Sarah was eating it the whole time; she's just laughing, and I'm like, "This is so funny that you love this movie." And there's some megafauna and crazy animals, and the original. Homo sapiens.
It's not. It can't grant you your wish, but I think it's probably the closest to like the cutest version of that you could watch right now.
That's good. It'll soothe me a bit.
Yeah.
And so I'll say, I guess if I were to just add a final question, is there forms of media, call it a movie, call it books, call it anything that you think paints worthwhile experience offering, if only through perspective, like insight into some truths? And so an answer might be, these books on primitive skills are very informative, or it might be this movie actually is like a really good take on what it is to be alone and afraid and a hunter.
I haven't found a lot of good books or things that convey the feelings I feel or the connection both spiritually as well as like physically, or it's hard to find good. Braiding Sweetgrass is one of my favorite books that gets into that. But I think, here's the point where I just kind of like all the things I'm describing and my desire as a human to be connected to the cycles of the earth, and my desire to have community, and my desire to have rites of passage, and to have certain songs I sing to certain plants when harvesting at a certain time of year, this like beautiful in-depth connection to the land is just indigenous people. Like that is what I'm trying to recreate, whether it be North American, Native Americans, or what we once had as, as my ancestors had as European, descendants. And so I guess that's my biggest inspiration for people is I'm a white dude in North Carolina trying to relearn these skills, and I don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's some beauty in that, but the Cherokee people, knew how to do all of the things I'm describing. And so I guess that's been my biggest inspiration, is reading as much as I can about indigenous humans around the world and how beautiful and ingenious and, that the Croods, is like kind of this rough caricature of what society or what civilization tells us we were as ancient humans. And that couldn't be further from the truth, that we were so much wiser, 10,000 years ago in a lot of ways, because we knew we were more likely to live in reciprocity with our land. And the things that we deem ourselves smart for, all these new technologies, are the things that are actually like going to poison us and kill us eventually, right? So, so I guess my plug for all that is learn native wisdom and be inspired by that that we're apes that used to make canoes out of whale skins and could travel around the world and live healthy, successful, happy lives. That's been my biggest inspiration and my biggest goal as a human, and my what I'm striving for every day. So
love it. And I think that might be a perfect way to wrap this up. So we'll just do the last question, which is, how would someone who is so intrigued by this conversation that we've had, how would they find you, connect with you on the World Wide Web or internet at large?
Yeah. HolisticSurvivalSchool.com is the best way to find all my offerings. Follow me on Instagram and the YouTubes and all that as well. But if you go to HolisticSurvivalSchool.com, that's got all the links there. So that's the best way.
Well, thank you so much for making time and having this incredible conversation. We look forward to post-quarantine maybe coming to the school, visiting you, and seeing what's going on the actual grounds.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
And that was episode 55 with Luke from Holistic Survival School. Sarah, I feel inspired and at peace and so curious. I want to I want to go on a hike, or I want to
I want to go outside
I want to go outside, yeah. So we're going to skip the exit. No, I'm kidding. So that was a very, I think, different podcast episode for us. I absolutely loved it. I think that Luke is onto something, and I look forward to the future more than already because I really want to go visit that school and learn some of those things and be taught by Luke. I think that he sold me on this conversation. I'm excited.
He sold me. I mean, I'm not even, like we talked about before, like I'm not as into survival skills, and like I like camping, but like the like bougie kind of camping. And so even me, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to go do like a 4-day weekend with
Foraging,
Luke and like
basket making.
Yes.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like a spiritual journey. That's very interesting. Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode, we would greatly appreciate it if you could, leave a review if you haven't already done so. You can do that on Apple Podcast. It's pretty simple and I think intuitive to do. Just click leave a review, say some nice things about us. It helps other people find this podcast and discover us. And the second thing we'd love if you could subscribe both to our podcast on your favorite podcast player and to our newsletter. Our newsletter is where we send out new episode announcements, behind the scenes information about each episode, as well as any upcoming events and announcements. So we typically announce those first to our newsletter, so they have first dibs. You can do all of that at makingitinashville.com/subscribe.
And if you had any questions about this episode or wanted more details, those details are all found in our show notes page, which is makingitinashville.com/055. That's the episode number and our main domain, or you can visit makingitinashville.com and click around. You'll find it. It's right there. But this episode specifically had a lot of really interesting information. We tried to capture it all in the show notes page. And so if you like this episode and are interested in learning more, visit the show notes page.
And lastly, just a quick thanks to our sponsor, Range Urgent Care, for sponsoring this episode and this season. Range is doing things incredibly differently. They're reimagining healthcare in a way that no one else really here in Asheville is doing. They offer things like completely transparent pricing, so you know exactly what you're going to pay before you go in. Affordable pricing, so it's $149 per visit, or if you have a yearly subscription, you pay even I think you don't
could
pay
be
anything.
less if you go a couple trips a year, which is how I would, I think, be if I wasn't so damn afraid of emergency room costs. I think I would go to doctors way more. So this is a great opportunity that they are right here in our backyard in Asheville. And so if you're interested in that, please visit makingitinashville.com/range. And we have a first month free and an annual subscription membership. And the membership size does not matter. It can be single, family, or business, or any other subscription plans that show up over, I guess, the remainder of this season. So please do check it out and tell them we sent you. And so that also means that if you go to their website instead of ours, you can use Making It in Asheville as a coupon code when checking out. So again, makingitinashville.com/range, or go to Range Urgent Care and use Making It in Asheville as a coupon code. Our other sponsor is our own very small but ever-growing marketing and sales and messaging and branding business. We call it a creative agency called Making It Creative. We work with small businesses here in Asheville and around the country on thinking about their messaging, their business specifically. So we go deep on who they are, what they're doing, and where the largest opportunities to create value might be. Because if we create value, for them as a business, we're also creating value for their customers. And so we're thinking about things like website messaging, we're thinking about email marketing, we're thinking about whatever might be the next best fit and thing to test and try. And it's been a thrill ride in the first year in business. We are excited about year 2. If you're interested in learning and starting a conversation with us about marketing services or consulting or whatever way we can add value, we're open to it. Just visit makingitcreative.com and you'll see exactly what steps to take to begin that process.
And lastly, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out. You can nominate them or yourself at makingitinasheville.com/podcast. And also don't forget to come to our monthly Monday Maker Mixer, which you can find more about on the events section of our website, so that we can meet you in person and hear a little bit about your story. We're always looking for new and interesting people to interview here, and we'd love to get to know you.
And there was a metaphorical, not literal, but asterisk on the in-person. We are aware that in-person events might not be still cool in May of
Did I say in person?
You did say in person.
It's like autopilot.
But it's true. We like to be in person when we can. May 2020, the answer might be virtual. So either way, it's face-to-face, whether it is a computer screen or in the physical world. It is one of our absolute favorite things to do, to see this community grow and get to connect with one another is a gift, and it's a part of our mission with this whole enterprise here, the Making It in Asheville podcast. So with that, holy smokes, ladies and gentlemen, we did it. Friend Sarah, episode 55. That's a wrap. High five. Thank you, you two, for watching to the very end.